Ilara was nothing. A ghost in the halls of a palace mourning a ghost king. Her existence was measured in buckets of soapy water and the sting of a superior's hand. She was wolfless, an omega by default, the lowest of the low in a world that prized the beast within. Her life was a cycle of silent suffering, punctuated only by the gnawing ache in her belly and the deeper ache in her soul. The throne room was her most frequent punishment and her strangest solace. There, upon a dais of black marble, sat King Theron, or what was left of him. 1 year ago, on the night of the blood moon, a curse had swept through the castle, an invisible, malevolent tide. It had found the alpha of alphas, the most powerful wolf on the continent, and turned him to granite. He was a monument to lost power, a terrifyingly perfect statue, caught in the middle of a step, his hand outstretched as if to ward off the inevitable. His face, which legends claimed could make armies tremble, was a mask of harsh, beautiful fury. His muscles were coiled, his jaw tight, his entire 6'7" frame radiating a lethal energy that even stone could not fully contain. And Ilara cleaned the floors around his feet. The chill from the marble seeped through the thin soles of her shoes, a constant reminder of her place. She was a creature of the cold, of the shadows. The grand fires in the hearths did little to warm her. The warmth was for them. For the nobles, the pack warriors, the chosen. "Faster, you useless cur!" a voice snapped, sharp as breaking glass. Ilara flinched, her shoulders hunching instinctively. She didn't need to look up to know it was Lady Seraphina, the Beta's daughter and the self-appointed mistress of the castle staff in the king's absence. Her perfume, a cloying mix of rose and entitlement, preceded her. "The regent is holding court this afternoon. Do you think he wants to see your grimy streaks all over his floor?" Seraphina's heeled shoe nudged Ilara's ribs, not hard enough to break anything, but sharp enough to steal her breath. "Look at me when I speak to you." Slowly, Ilara lifted her head. Seraphina was everything she was not. Tall, radiant, with a wolf that gave her an aura of predatory grace. Her hair was the color of spun gold, her eyes a piercing blue. Contempt twisted her perfect lips as she looked down at Ilara. "Pathetic," Seraphina sneered. "No wolf, no family, no worth. It's a miracle the regent hasn't had you thrown out to starve. I certainly would have." Ilara dropped her gaze back to the floor, her knuckles white on the handle of her mop. Saying nothing was the only defense she had. Words earned her backhands. Silence earned her only scorn. The morning ball is in 3 days," Seraphina continued, pacing around the dais. "A commemoration of the day our glorious king was lost. The regent has spared no expense. You will be on serving duty, and if you so much as spill a single drop, I will personally see you flogged in the courtyard." Ilara's blood ran cold. A public event, hundreds of people, all of them powerful, all of them with wolves that could scent her fear, her weakness. It was her worst nightmare. "Now get out of my sight. The memory of your face is spoiling my morning." Scrambling to her feet, Ilara gathered her bucket and mop, her eyes darting one last time to the Stone King. A strange pang of shared imprisonment echoed in her chest. He was trapped in stone. She was trapped in this life. In that, at least, they were equals. She hurried from the room, the sound of Seraphina's cruel laughter following her down the corridor. Her own secret was a quiet, baffling thing. A small, silvery birthmark in the shape of a crescent moon rested on the inside of her left wrist. She kept it covered always, wrapped in a strip of spare cloth. It was the only thing her mother had left her, besides a legacy of being an outcast. Sometimes, especially when she was near the Stone King, it would tingle. A faint, humming warmth that was both unnerving and strangely comforting. Her mother had told her it was a blessing from the moon goddess, a mark of protection. But it had never protected her from a blow, or from hunger, or from the biting cold of her tiny room in the servants' barracks. It was just another oddity, another reason to hide. another secret in a life built of them. That night, sleep offered no escape. She dreamt of gold eyes, blazing with an ancient fire, and a voice like a landslide that whispered a single, possessive word she couldn't quite hear. She woke with a gasp, the tingling in her wrist now a persistent, urgent pulse. The dream felt real, a memory that wasn't hers. Unable to rest, she dressed in the dark and slipped out of the barracks. The castle was silent, a labyrinth of moon-drenched shadows. She didn't know where she was going, only that she was being pulled. A magnetic force drew her through the winding halls, up the grand staircase, and back toward the one place she should have been avoiding. The throne room was vast and empty. Moonlight streamed through the high arched windows, bathing the petrified king in an ethereal silver glow. He looked less like a statue now and more like a warrior god, paused between heartbeats. The air around him was thick, heavy with the phantom scent of ozone and ancient pines, the ghost of his immense power. Alara approached slowly, her bare feet silent on the cold marble. The pull was centered on him, an invisible string tied between her strange birthmark and his stone heart. The tingling in her wrist was almost painful now, a frantic, insistent thrum. She stopped at the foot of the dais, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was madness. She should run. She should be in her bed counting the hours until another day of misery. But she couldn't move. She could only stare. He was magnificent. Even in stone, his presence was apocalyptic. He was power incarnate, fury given form. And he was alone. A profound, aching sorrow washed over her, a sorrow so deep it felt like it was coming from her own soul. He didn't deserve this. No one did. Hesitantly, she reached out, her fingers trembling. She laid her hand on his granite arm. A jolt, sharp and electric, shot up her arm. It wasn't cold stone she felt. Underneath the hard gray exterior, she felt a flicker. A faint, impossibly distant beat, like the flutter of a trapped bird's wings. The crescent moon on her wrist blazed with a white-hot heat, the pain so intense it made her cry out. The room seemed to dim as all the light was drawn to the point of contact. The silver moonlight coalesced around her hand, flowing from her birthmark into the stone. The humming in her head grew to a roar. An impulse, primal and overwhelming, seized her. It wasn't her own. It was a command from the deepest part of her being, from the ancient magic sleeping in her blood. Heal him. She stepped onto the dais, her body moving with a will of its own. She stood before him, her head barely reaching his chest. She looked up at his face, at the anger and anguish carved into his features. She raised her other hand, cupping his stone cheek. And then she leaned in. She pressed her lips against his. The stone was cold, unyielding. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. She felt a fool, a mad girl kissing a statue in the dead of night. Humiliation washed over her. Then the world exploded. A sound like a mountain cracking in two ripped through the silence. A web of incandescent silver lines raced across the king's stone body, originating from her lips and her hand. The floor beneath her feet trembled. The very air vibrated with a cataclysmic release of power. The stone began to flake away, turning to dust and smoke that smelled of wet earth and lightning. The gray receded from his face, revealing the warm, living flesh beneath. The granite of his chest softened under her palm. The cold vanished, replaced by a furnace-like heat. Alara stumbled back, her hand falling away, her lips parting from his. She watched, breathless, as the last of the curse disintegrated. King Theron stood before her, whole and alive. His skin was tanned, his hair a cascade of midnight black. He was dressed in the same black tunic and leather breeches he'd worn when the curse took him. He took a deep, shuddering breath, the first in a year. And then he opened his eyes. They were not the eyes of a statue. They were the color of molten gold, blazing with a feral, terrifying intelligence. They scanned the room in a blur before landing on her. They narrowed. He inhaled again, deeper this time, his head tilting slightly. A low growl rumbled in his chest, a sound so powerful it vibrated in Alara's bones. He was scenting her, scenting the air around her, the magic that clung to her, the very essence of her soul. The scent of moonlight and wild jasmine, a fragrance he had dreamed of for centuries. The scent of his mate. His golden eyes locked onto hers, and the world fell away. The fury in them was replaced by something far more dangerous. A manic, possessive recognition, an apocalyptic hunger. He took a single predatory step forward. Mine, he rasped, his voice a gravelly echo of the one from her dream. It wasn't a word, it was a claim, a brand, a fact of nature. Alara's mind went blank with terror and a strange, exhilarating awe. The Alpha King was alive, and he was looking at her as if she were the only thing in the universe. He was supposed to be a statue, a memory, a fixture of her miserable life. Now he was flesh and blood and overwhelming power, and his eyes promised things she couldn't begin to comprehend. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice gaining strength, each word a command that vibrated through her. I am Alara," she stammered, instinctively taking a step back. It was a mistake. In a movement too fast for her eyes to follow, he closed the distance between them. His large, warm hands clamped onto her upper arms, not painfully, but with an unbreakable strength. He loomed over her, a mountain of muscle and heat and raw dominance. "Ilara," he repeated, tasting the name. His gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. "You freed me." I don't know how," she whispered, her body trembling. The proximity to him was intoxicating and terrifying. His scent was overwhelming, pine, winter storm, and pure alpha. It called to a part of her she never knew existed. "I do," he growled, his thumb stroking her arm, sending fire through her veins. "The prophecy, the moon-kissed, the one with the power to break the witch's curse." His eyes flickered down to her wrist, still wrapped in its cloth. Before she could react, he tore the fabric away. The crescent moon birthmark was glowing, a soft, silvery light pulsing in time with her frantic heartbeat. Theron stared at it, a look of grim satisfaction on his face. "It's true." He looked back at her, his expression unreadable. "My mate." The words hit her like a physical blow. Mate? Her? A wolfless Omega? The mate to the Alpha of Alphas? It was impossible. A cruel joke. "No," she breathed. "That can't be. I'm nobody." "You are everything," he snarled, a wave of possessive fury rolling off him. "And you are mine." Footsteps echoed in the hall. Heavy, running footsteps. Guards, alerted by the noise. Theron's head snapped up, his body instantly shielding hers. The protective instinct was so powerful, so absolute, it was a physical force. "Stay behind me," he commanded. The order was not a suggestion, it was woven with alpha power, and her body tried to obey before her mind could even process it. The throne room doors burst open. A dozen guards in the regent's silver and black livery flooded in, swords drawn. They skidded to a halt, their faces a mixture of confusion and sheer, unadulterated terror. At their head was a tall, powerfully built man with gray-streaked hair and weary, intelligent eyes. Ilara recognized him as Kale, the former king's beta. He now served the regent, but the loyalty in his eyes had always seemed hollow. Kale's jaw dropped, his sword slipped from his numb fingers and clattered onto the marble. My king?" he whispered, his voice choked with disbelief. "Kale." Theron's voice was clipped, dangerous. "Good to see your eyes still work. My cousin. Where is he?" "The Regent Valerius? He is in his chambers," Kale stammered, taking a hesitant step forward. We thought the statue had collapsed." "It did," Theron said, his golden eyes sweeping over the guards, daring any of them to move. "Now tell me everything. 1 year. What has that bastard done to my kingdom?" Kale's gaze flickered to Alara, huddled behind the formidable king. He saw the torn cloth on the floor, the glowing mark on her wrist, the possessive way Theron stood in front of her. Understanding, swift and absolute, dawned on his face. The prophecy was real. "More than you can imagine, my king," Kyle said, his voice hardening with renewed loyalty. He dropped to one knee. "The kingdom has been bleeding." The other guards, seeing their commander kneel, quickly followed suit, a wave of clattering armor and whispered oaths. They had served the regent out of duty, but their true allegiance had only ever been sleeping. "He's been purging loyalists," Kale continued, his eyes dark. "Taxing the outer packs into starvation, hoarding wealth, and he planned a mourning ball in 3 days to celebrate his continued rule." Theron's hands clenched into fists. A low, feral growl escaped his lips. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "He will have a celebration," he snarled. "But he will be the one in mourning." His gaze softened fractionally as he glanced back at Alara. The sight of her, so small and frightened but with an undeniable core of strength, centered him. "Kale, secure the throne room. No one enters or leaves. Send your most trusted man to my chambers. Have them prepared. For my queen." Queen. The word hung in the air, more shocking than the king's return. The guards stared. Kale's eyes widened, but he nodded. "And find me clothes that don't feel like they're a year old," Theron added, a flicker of his old, imperious self returning. He turned his full attention back to Alara, his hands gently cupping her face. "You are safe now," he murmured, his voice softer than she could have imagined. "No one will ever harm you again. That is my vow." Alara could only stare into his blazing golden eyes, her world tilting on its axis. A maid, a wolfless Omega. And now, a queen? Her mind couldn't grasp it, but the feeling of his hands on her skin, the raw power radiating from him, the absolute certainty in his eyes, that was undeniable. "Come," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. He slid one arm around her waist, pulling her flush against his side, and began walking toward the private passage behind the throne. "We have much to discuss. And then, I have a brother to punish. A correction. A cousin." The word was spat like a curse. Kale and the guards watched them go, a silent, awe-struck tableau. The king was back. And he had brought the storm with him. The prophecy had come true not with a whisper, but with an apocalyptic roar. The royal suite was a world away from Alara's cramped cot. It was larger than the entire servants' barracks, with plush carpets, a roaring fireplace, and a bed so large it could have slept 10. Fresh clothes had been laid out for the king. Black trousers, a simple linen shirt that did little to hide the sculpted muscle of his chest. Theron had not let go of her. He led her to a set of velvet armchairs near the fire and finally released her, though he remained standing, pacing before the hearth like a caged tiger. The energy pouring off him was immense, a physical presence in the room. Alara sat on the edge of the chair, her hands clenched in her lap. She felt like a mouse in a lion's den. "Tell me your name again," he commanded, stopping his pacing to fix her with his intense stare. "Alara," she said, her voice a little stronger this time. "Ilara," he repeated, the name a low growl. "And you have no wolf?" She shook her head, shame creeping in despite the circumstances. "No, my king. Do not call me that. My name is Theron." He ran a hand through his dark hair. "The old legends. They spoke of the moon-kissed mate. They said she would not be of the wolf, but of the moon itself. That her power would be different. Older. They said it would be the only thing that could break a blood curse laid by a primeval witch." He looked at her, a new understanding dawning in his eyes. "You are not wolfless, Alara. You are something else entirely." Before she could respond, Kale entered, bowing deeply. "My king, the castle is secure. The regent and his cronies suspect nothing. They believe the sounds were a minor tremor." "Good," Theron grunted. "Valerius always was an arrogant fool. He turned to Kale. The ball. It proceeds as planned. I want him fat and happy on his stolen throne. I want everyone there. Every noble, every sycophant who grew rich in my absence. And her? Kyle asked, his gaze respectfully avoiding Alara but his meaning clear. Theron's jaw tightened. She will be there, but not as a servant. His eyes found Alara's. She will be at my side. Alara's heart leaped into her throat. I can't, she blurted out. They'll… Seraphina. She'll kill me. Theron went utterly still. Who is Seraphina? He asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Kale answered for her, his tone grim. Beta Alaric's daughter. She has been cruel to the staff, especially to Alara. The air crackled with the king's sudden lethal rage. It was a palpable thing, a pressure that made the flames in the fireplace shrink back. His golden eyes turned molten. Cruel? He whispered. Show me. It was an alpha command, imbued with a power that bypassed thought and went straight to the soul. Alara couldn't have resisted if she wanted to. An image flooded her mind. Seraphina kicking her in the ribs just that morning. Theron saw it. He flinched as if he'd been struck himself, a savage growl ripping from his chest. The mate bond. He felt a phantom echo of her pain. She dared to lay a hand on what is mine. He roared, the sound shaking the very foundations of the room. He took a step toward the door, his intent apocalyptic. I'll tear her throat out. Theron, no! Alara cried, surging to her feet and grabbing his arm. It was like trying to stop a rock slide. Not yet. Please. Your plan. The ball. He froze, his muscles corded and trembling with restraint. He looked from her desperate face to her hand on his arm. It took every ounce of his centuries of control not to unleash the feral beast screaming within him, chaining a hurricane inside a glass jar. You plead for her? He snarled, though the killing edge of his rage had been blunted by her touch. No, Alara said firmly, surprising herself. I plead for your justice, not blind rage. Let her see you return. Let them all see you return. Let them understand what they have done before you pass sentence. Theron stared at her, his manic fury slowly receding, replaced by a profound sense of awe. She was not just his mate, not just his salvation. She had a spine of steel. She was a queen. He nodded slowly. As you wish, my queen. He turned to Kale. The ball will be a trial. And a coronation. Find her a dress. Something worthy of the moon itself. And Kale? He added, his voice dropping back into that lethal whisper. Ensure Beta Alaric and his daughter have front row seats. It will be done, Kale said, bowing again before swiftly departing. Theron turned back to Alara, his expression softening. He gently traced the crescent mark on her wrist. They underestimated you. They saw a maid, a wolfless girl. They were blind. He lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to the mark, his lips lingering. I see a goddess. I see my salvation. I see my home. Alara's breath hitched. No one had ever spoken to her with such reverence. No one had ever looked at her like she was precious. A warmth bloomed in her chest, chasing away years of cold. It was terrifying. It was wonderful. For the next 2 days, she was kept hidden within the opulent suite. Servants, loyal to Kale, brought her food, fine silks, and bath oils that smelled of lavender and honey. It was a dizzying transformation. She went from sleeping on a straw pallet to a bed draped in velvet. From eating stale bread to dining on roasted quail. Theron was a constant, overwhelming presence. He explained the mate bond, the primal, unbreakable connection between their souls. He told her stories of his wolf, a creature of immense power that had recognized her essence even through the stone. He spent hours just watching her, his golden eyes filled with a fierce possessiveness that made her skin tingle. He learned of her life, of the endless abuse and neglect. With every story she reluctantly told, his rage simmered, a controlled inferno waiting for the moment of release. He felt her pain, her loneliness, her quiet resilience through the bond, and his devotion to her became something absolute, something terrifying in its intensity. The dress arrived on the evening of the ball. It was a creation of midnight blue silk that shimmered with threads of pure silver, like a captured night sky. It was elegant, powerful, and utterly terrifying to behold. "You are the night, and the moon, and the stars," Theron murmured, his voice thick with emotion as he watched her stare at it. "Tonight, the entire world will see you shine." As the sun set, the castle came alive with music and laughter. Carriages arrived, disgorging nobles in their finest jewels and silks. The great hall was a sea of glittering bodies, all gathered to pay homage to the regent. Lord Valerius sat on the throne, a golden circlet on his brow, a smug proprietary look on his face. He was Theron's cousin, but he lacked the king's raw power, replacing it with a cruel, reptilian cunning. He raised a goblet. "To the memory of my dear cousin, King Theron," he announced, his voice ringing with false sorrow. "A year has passed since his tragic stiffening. May his sacrifice pave the way for a new era of prosperity, an era under my guidance." A ragged cheer went up from the crowd. Seraphina stood near the throne, resplendent in a blood-red gown, her eyes scanning the room. She was looking for Ilara, eager to find some fault, to inflict some small cruelty to amuse herself. But the little maid was nowhere to be found. A flicker of annoyance crossed her face. At that moment, the music faltered. A cold draft swept through the hall, making the tapestries sway and the candles flicker. The great oaken doors at the far end of the hall, the ones that led from the throne room, began to swing open. A hush fell over the crowd. Those doors had been sealed for a year. Two of Kyle's guards stood there, their faces grim. They stepped aside, and King Theron walked in. He was not a statue, he was a storm. Dressed in black, his golden eyes blazing, he moved with a lethal grace that promised death. The sheer, apocalyptic force of his presence hit the room like a physical blow. A collective gasp, 1,000 breaths stolen at once. Goblets shattered on the floor. Women screamed. Men cursed, their faces draining of all color. Valerius shot to his feet, his face a mask of disbelief and pure terror. "No, it's not possible. You're stone." Theron ignored him. He ignored everyone. His gaze swept the room, a predator scanning a herd of prey. He found Seraphina, and his eyes narrowed with a promise of retribution that made her stumble back, her face as white as bone. Then his eyes continued their search. They passed over the nobles, the warriors, the hangers-on. They were looking for one person. He found her. Standing in the shadows of a side entrance, where Kale had positioned her, stood Ilara. She was breathtaking in the midnight blue gown, her silver birthmark bare and glowing softly in the candlelight. She was terrified, but she stood tall. The world ceased to exist for Theron. There was only her. He began to walk. Not toward the throne. Not toward his traitorous cousin. He walked straight toward her. The crowd parted before him like water before the prow of a warship. A path cleared, a line drawn directly from the resurrected king to the unknown girl in the shadows. Ilara's heart was a frantic drum. This was it, the point of no return. He stopped in front of her. The entire hall held its breath. Without a word, he reached out, took her hand, and brought it to his lips, kissing her knuckles with a reverence that stunned the onlookers. Then he turned, pulling her gently to his side, and faced the silent, terrified assembly. "You mourned a king of stone," Theron's voice boomed, imbued with an alpha power that made the very air tremble. "Tonight, you will answer to a king of flesh and blood." His gaze fell upon Valerius, who was trembling on the dais. "Cousin," he snarled, the word dripping with venom. "You seem to be sitting in my chair." Valerius opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His reign was over. He just didn't know how horrifically it was about to end. Theron held Alara's hand, his thumb stroking the back of it reassuringly. He looked down at her, a silent question in his eyes. "Are you ready?" She met his gaze, saw the devotion, the promise of protection, the shared future. She took a breath and gave a small, firm nod. He turned back to the stunned court, a cruel, triumphant smile gracing his lips for the first time. The reckoning had begun. "Guards!" Theron's voice was deceptively calm, but it held the lethal promise of a coiled serpent. "Seize Lord Valerius. He has questions to answer." The regent's personal guard, men who had sworn loyalty to him, hesitated for a single, fatal second. They looked at the returned king, a figure of myth and terror made real, and then at the usurper on the throne. Their survival instincts won. They dropped their spears and knelt. It was Cale's men who surged forward, grabbing the sputtering Valerius by the arms and dragging him from the throne. "Treason! This is treason!" Valerius shrieked, his face purple with rage and fear. "He is an impostor, a shade, a trick." Theron simply laughed, a low, dark sound that held no humor. He led Alara toward the dais, his steps unhurried. The crowd remained frozen, a sea of horrified faces. He ascended the steps, not even glancing at the struggling Valerius, and gestured for Alara to stand beside the throne. He remained standing, a towering figure of judgment. "A trick?" Theron mused, his golden eyes locking onto his cousin. "Tell me, Valerius, was it a trick when you met with the Blood Witch of the Black Wood? Was it a trick when you paid her with gold from my own vaults to curse me?" Valerius went rigid. "Lies. Slander." "Is it?" Theron tilted his head. "Cale, the evidence." Cale stepped forward, holding a small, lead-lined box. He opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, was a gnarled obsidian ring pulsing with a faint, malevolent energy. "We found this in the regent's private vault," Cale announced. "It is a witch's focus. It still reeks of your cousin's scent, my king. And of the petrification curse." The nobles gasped. The use of blood magic was the highest of crimes, punishable only by death. "And what of Seraphina, daughter of Alaric?" Theron's voice dropped, and his gaze swept the crowd to find her. She was trying to shrink back, to disappear into the mass of people, but his eyes pinned her like a moth to a board. I did nothing," she cried, her voice high and shrill with panic. "Nothing?" Theron's voice was a silky, dangerous whisper. He looked at Alara. "My queen, has this woman done nothing to you?" All eyes swung to Alara. She felt the weight of 1,000 stares, but the warmth of Theron's hand in hers was an anchor. She remembered the kick to her ribs, the years of insults, the constant humiliation. She looked at Seraphina, at the fear that had replaced the cruelty in her eyes. "She has been unjust," Alara said, her voice clear and steady, ringing with an authority she never knew she possessed. "She has been cruel not only to me, but to all those she deemed beneath her." The simple, damning statement was enough. "My mate has spoken," Theron declared, his voice booming through the hall. "My mate, my queen. The one the prophecy called the moon-kissed. The one whose power you could not see. The one who broke your pathetic curse, Valerius, with a single touch." He pulled Alara forward slightly, displaying her glowing birthmark for all to see. It pulsed with a soft, undeniable power. It was the ultimate proof. The king was back, and he had his fated queen. "You harmed her," Theron said, his voice dropping to a feral growl as he looked back at Seraphina. "You laid hands on the future of this kingdom. You kicked your queen." Seraphina let out a choked sob and fell to her knees, her finery pooling around her like blood. "Mercy, your majesty, please." "Mercy," Theron echoed. "Did you show her mercy? Did you show any of them mercy?" He gestured to the servants lining the walls, who were now staring with wide, hopeful eyes. "You abused your power. You tormented the weak. There is no place for that in my kingdom." He looked at Valerius, whose struggles had ceased. He was simply staring, defeated. "For the crime of high treason, for the use of blood magic against your king, I sentence you, Valerius, to the black cells until the witch who aided you is found. Then you will face the executioner's block together." He then turned his apocalyptic gaze to Seraphina. "For your crimes against the queen of this realm, you are hereby stripped of your title and lands. You will spend the rest of your days scrubbing the floors of the dungeons you once lorded over. You will know what it is to be powerless. Take them away." Guards hauled the screaming Valerius and the sobbing, broken Seraphina from the hall. A stunned silence remained. Theron finally sat on his throne, pulling Alara gently onto his lap. It was a scandalously possessive public gesture, a clear and absolute statement. She belonged to him. The throne belonged to him. The kingdom belonged to him. He looked out at the sea of faces, some terrified, some relieved, some opportunistic. "This is a new day," he announced, his voice ringing with absolute power. "There is a queen on the throne beside me. Her word is my word. Her enemies are my enemies. All of you will show her the respect you failed to show before. Or you will answer to me. The age of corruption is over. The age of my queen has begun." He leaned down and kissed her, a deep, possessive kiss in front of his entire court. It was not gentle. It was a brand, a claim, a promise of a shared reign. When he pulled back, her face was flushed, but her eyes were bright. The court, seeing its cue, its path to survival, dropped as one. Nobles, warriors, and servants all knelt. He knelt. She sat on the throne. The entire world was at her feet. It was the most terrifying and exhilarating moment of her life. The little maid was gone, erased by the return of the king. In her place, a queen was being born from fire and prophecy. Later that night, in the safety of the royal suite, the adrenaline began to fade, leaving Alara feeling shaky and overwhelmed. Theron dismissed the guards, leaving them completely alone. He built up the fire, his large frame moving with a quiet efficiency that belied the storm of violence he had just unleashed. "Are you well?" he asked, his voice softer now, the Alpha King replaced by the concerned mate. "I don't know what I am," she confessed, sinking into one of the plush armchairs. "It's too much. The dress, the throne, you." He came to her, kneeling before her chair so they were at eye level. He took her hands in his. "You are my mate, Ilara, my queen, the other half of my soul. Nothing else matters. But my power," she whispered, looking at her glowing wrist. "I don't understand it. I didn't do anything. It just happened." "That is the nature of true power," he said, his golden eyes earnest. "It is a part of you. You didn't wield it. You are it." The witch's curse was strong, woven from blood and shadow. Only a power of equivalent strength, one of light and life, could break it. The power of the moon goddess, flowing through your bloodline. He explained the ancient lore, the stories his own ancestors had passed down. Of a time when the first wolves had been blessed by the sun, and a single divine lineage had been blessed by the moon. A lineage thought to be lost for 1,000 years. "Your mother must have known," he murmured. "She hid you. She kept you safe by making you seem small, wolfless, powerless." Tears welled in Alara's eyes. It wasn't a curse. It was protection. Her whole life, she had felt ashamed of what she was, when in fact it had been her shield. Suddenly, Theron stiffened. His head snapped up, a low growl building in his chest. His eyes fixed on the darkest corner of the room, near the heavy velvet curtains. "What is it?" Alara asked, her fear returning. "We are not alone," he snarled, rising to his full, intimidating height. His body shifted, becoming a bulwark between her and the shadows. A dry, rasping laugh echoed from the corner. "The Alpha King, alive and well, and with his little pet." A figure stepped out of the shadows. It was a woman, ancient and hunched, her face a roadmap of cruel lines. Her eyes glowed with a sickly green light, and the air around her smelled of decay and dark magic. The Blood Witch. Valerius was a fool, the witch cackled, her gaze fixed on Alara. He wanted the throne. I just wanted to finish a job I started a long time ago. Your bloodline should have ended with your mother. Theron moved, a blur of shadow and muscle, but the witch was faster. She flicked her wrist, and a shimmering wall of purple energy erupted in front of him, throwing him back several feet. He hit the stone wall with a sickening thud. Theron! Alara screamed. The king can't help you now, little moonbeam, the witch sneered, advancing on Alara. His power is of the earth, mine is of the void, and I will snuff out your little light for good. She raised a gnarled hand, her fingers crackling with black and green energy. A bolt of pure shadow shot toward Alara. There was no time to think, no time to run. There was only instinct. Alara threw her hands up in front of her face, a desperate, useless gesture. She squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the impact, for the end. But it never came. A blinding, silent explosion of silver light erupted from her body. It was not a conscious act. It was a primal, desperate defense. The crescent moon on her wrist blazed like a miniature sun. The wave of pure, lunar energy was not violent. It was absolute. It was the antithesis of the witch's magic. The bolt of shadow dissolved into nothingness a foot from her face. The silver light washed over the witch. The old woman screamed, a high, thin sound of agony as the pure energy unmade her dark spells. The sickly green in her eyes guttered and died. The magic holding her ancient body together failed. She crumbled, collapsing into a pile of dust and black robes on the carpet. The silver light receded, drawing back into Alara, leaving her breathless and trembling, but unharmed. Theron was on his feet in an instant, the magical barrier gone. He rushed to her side, his hands checking her for injuries, his eyes wide with frantic concern and utter awe. Alara, are you hurt? She shook her head, staring at the pile of dust on the floor. I think I killed her. You defended yourself, he corrected, his voice thick with pride. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. You saved yourself. Your power. It's magnificent. She buried her face in his chest, the scent of pine and winter storm chasing away the smell of decay. She had done that. That immense, silent power had come from her. She wasn't just a key to break a curse. She was a force of nature in her own right. He held her for a long time, his heart hammering against her ear. The final threat was gone. Neutralized not by his strength, but by hers. They were not a king and his fragile mate. They were two equal, terrifying powers, a king of the earth and a queen of the moon. It's over, he murmured into her hair. It's truly over. She looked up at him, at his fierce, handsome face, his blazing golden eyes now filled with nothing but love and devotion. She finally felt it. Not fear, not confusion, but a sense of belonging, a sense of home. It's just beginning, she whispered back. And she sealed her promise with a kiss, no longer a maid kissing a statue, but a queen claiming her king. 6 months later, Luna Queen Alara stood on the grand balcony of the royal palace, overlooking the capital city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. At her side, King Theron wrapped a strong arm around her waist, pulling her back against his solid chest. The kingdom was healing. Under their joint rule, the corrupt nobles had been replaced, the exorbitant taxes had been lifted, and grain flowed once more to the outer packs. The fear that had permeated the land under Valerius's reign had been replaced by a fierce, protective loyalty to the new king and his moon-kissed queen. Alara was no longer the timid, frightened girl who scrubbed floors. She was a confident ruler. Her quiet strength and innate kindness had won the hearts of the people, while her hidden power, now understood and respected, earned her the awe of the nobles. She advised Theron in council, her wisdom tempering his ferocity. They were a perfect balance. "What are you thinking about?" Theron's deep voice rumbled against her ear. "I was just remembering," she said, a soft smile on her lips. "A girl who used to be terrified of this room, who used to scrub the floors right where we're standing." He turned her in his arms to face him, his golden eyes soft. "I remember a statue," he murmured, "who was trapped in an endless night, dreaming of a scent he couldn't place, dreaming of the one soul in the universe who could bring him back into the light." He gently cupped her cheek, his thumb stroking her skin. "You were never just a maid, Alara. You were a queen in hiding, a diamond waiting for the dirt to be washed away. And you were a king waiting for a kiss," she teased, her confidence now second nature. A low, possessive growl rumbled in his chest, a sound that no longer scared her, but thrilled her to her core. "I was waiting for my queen, and I would have waited 1,000 years in that stone for you." He lowered his head, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was both tender and fiercely passionate. It spoke of battles won, of a future secured, of a love that had defied curses and remade a kingdom. It was a promise of forever. Her inner strength had not just freed a king, it had freed herself. And in doing so, she found that love was not just a fairy tale, but the most powerful and untamable magic of all. And so the wolfless maid and the stone king ruled together, their legend whispered across the lands for generations to come. A story of how a single gentle kiss held the power to shatter curses, awaken kings, and forge a new dawn from the heart of the darkest night. Their love became the bedrock of a new, stronger kingdom, proving that true power is not always found in the ferocity of a wolf, but in the unwavering strength of a loving heart. The changes in the kingdom were more than just political. The very atmosphere of the palace had shifted. Laughter was heard in the halls again. The servants, no longer living in fear of a cruel mistress, performed their duties with a genuine sense of pride. Ilara had made it her personal mission to know each of them by name, to ensure they were treated with the dignity she had been denied. Serafina, now stripped of her name and finery, was a grim lesson to all. Ilara had seen her once, from a distance, her once immaculate hands raw and red from the harsh lye soap. There was no triumph in the sight, only a sad sense of justice fulfilled. Power, Ilara had learned, was not the ability to cause pain, but the authority to heal it. Valerius had met his end 2 months prior, on the same day the Blood Witch's dust was ceremonially scattered into a volcano. His execution was swift. Theron had offered him a warrior's death, but in the end, Valerius had simply wept. His greed had cost him everything. Now, standing on the balcony, feeling the cool night air on her face, Ilara felt a profound sense of peace. Her power no longer felt alien. It was a warm, steady presence within her, a quiet hum beneath her skin that echoed the soft glow of the rising moon. She had learned to touch it, to call upon small measures of it to soothe a crying child, or encourage the growth of the medicinal herbs in the royal garden. It was a power of life, and she was its guardian. Kale reports that the northern packs have pledged their unconditional fealty, Theron said, breaking the comfortable silence. They were the last of the holdouts. The entire continent is ours. United. It is yours, Ilara corrected gently. You are their king. No, he said, his voice firm. He placed a hand over her still flat stomach, a gesture full of hope and promise. It is ours. And one day, it will be theirs. A blush crept up Ilara's neck, but she did not pull away. The thought of a child, an heir with his father's golden eyes and her mother's lunar grace, was a future she was beginning to allow herself to dream of. A family, something she had never had. An heir with your strength and my stubbornness, she murmured, leaning her head against his shoulder. Goddess help our enemies, he chuckled, the sound a warm vibration against her. They will be unstoppable. He grew serious again, his gaze sweeping over their city, their kingdom. I was a hard king before the curse, Ilara. Ruthless, cold. I thought strength was all that mattered. A year in stone, conscious but unable to move or speak, taught me patience. But you. He turned her to face him again, his eyes full of raw emotion. You taught me compassion. You taught me how to be a ruler, not just a warrior. And you taught me that I was not nothing, she whispered, her hand coming up to cup his jaw. You saw a queen when I only saw a maid. I saw my other half, he stated, as if it were the most fundamental truth in the universe. The rest was merely detail. Their reign was a testament to that bond. His unyielding strength was the kingdom's shield, her gentle wisdom its heart. Where he was the storm, she was the calm harbor. They attended every council meeting together, their thrones placed side by side, a symbol of their united front. No one dared to question it. No one dared to challenge the king who had returned from stone, or the queen who held the moon in her veins. The story of her past, once a source of shame, had become a legend of hope for the common people. The Omega Maid who became queen was a symbol that worth was not determined by birth or power, but by the content of one's character. She was their queen, not just by marriage to the king, but by the love and respect she had earned. As the first stars began to appear in the twilight sky, Theron led her back inside, away from the chill. The fire in their chambers cast a warm, dancing light across the room. It was their sanctuary, the one place where they were not a king and a queen, but simply Theron and Ilara. He stopped in the middle of the room, simply holding her, swaying gently as if to a song only they could hear. The bond between them was a living thing, a constant current of warmth, love, and unwavering devotion that flowed between their souls. I love you, he murmured, the words raw and heartfelt. For a man who had once been emotionally barren, the declaration was as powerful as any alpha command. I love you, she answered without hesitation, her voice full of a certainty that had been forged in magic and fire. He kissed her then, a long, slow, and deeply loving kiss that held the promise of 1,000 more nights just like this one. It was a kiss of peace, of contentment, of a happily ever after that had been hard-won and would be cherished for all their days. The Stone King was gone forever, replaced by a man who had found his heart in the gentle hands of a simple maid. And in his love, she had found the strength to become the queen she was always meant to be. From a tormented maid to a revered queen, Ilara's journey was a testament to the quiet strength that resides in the most unexpected of souls. She had faced down cruelty, broken a timeless curse, and embraced a power that could have consumed her. Alongside her fated mate, the formidable King Theron, she healed a fractured kingdom and forged a new era of peace and justice, proving that true royalty is not a matter of bloodline, but of heart. I really hope you enjoyed this story of love, magic, and redemption. It was a wild ride watching Ilara go from a forgotten maid to a powerful queen. What was your favorite moment? Was it the curse breaking in the throne room, or the epic confrontation at the morning ball? Let me know in the comments below. If you want to see more stories like this, with powerful alpha kings and the strong mates who bring them to their knees, make sure to absolutely destroy that like button and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss a new adventure. Your support really helps the channel grow and allows me to bring you more epic tales. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next story.